So let's start. So this is the part 3, the last part of medical quiz which we have conducted in 2019. So see there. Okay, this is question number 53 because we are continuing from the same one. This newborn has ambiguous genitalia as shown in the picture. You can clearly see here. The investigation report reveals sodium 120 millimole per liter and potassium 6 millimole per liter. What is the most probable diagnosis? Anybody?
Congenital adrenal hyperplasia.
So congenital adrenal hyperplasia. Okay, so can you explain it? Why?
Sir, because number one is the appearance of genitalia it's ambiguous, and the lab studies telling us hyponatremia and hyperkalemia because there is a less glucocorticoid and mineralocorticoid synthesis, and the hormone synthesis is shifted toward the sex steroid because 21 beta hydroxylase is deficient in this patient.
Very good, very good. So he's answering in a very appropriate way. This is the ambiguous genitalia, which you can clearly see. Okay, so actually what must have happened here, genotypically she is a girl. Okay, genotypically she is a girl, but phenotypically it looks like male genitalia. Now see this, this is hypertrophied clitoris. Okay, and these are the labia majora. Sometimes these labia majora fuse with each other, it almost looks like scrotum, but here still a gap is there in the midline. Still we can suspect this as a girl baby actually if we examine properly, but this clear cut case of ambiguous genitalia. Okay, usually these babies are female or girl babies. And another important clue for you is, look at the level of sodium here, it is less, it is low, and potassium is high. What does that mean? That means aldosterone and probably cortisols are deficient, and there is no proper retention of sodium in the body. Okay, so see that's why there is hyponatremia and hyperkalemia. Or you can also remember like this, the normal function of aldosterone is retention of sodium and excretion of potassium. When aldosterone is deficient, the opposite thing will occur. So potassium is high and sodium is deficient. All of these are classical features of CAH, congenital adrenal hyperplasia. Most important enzyme is 21 hydroxylase deficiency. Okay, 21 hydroxylase deficiency, and because of lack of synthesis of mineralocorticoid and glucocorticoid, all the synthetic process is diverted towards androgen formation. So this is the major problem here. Excellent. Let's move on. Now look at this picture very carefully and tell me which side of the face is paralyzed. Is it right side or the left side? Yes.
The right side is paralyzed.
So he's saying right side is paralyzed. Anybody else? Any other student? Okay, Aman, why right side?
Sir, because the angle of mouth on the right side is drooping downward, and also there is no wrinkling on forehead on right side, and the left side is normal, so the angle of mouth on the left side is pulled toward that side.
Very good. All the features he has explained correctly again. Now see this. This is a classical picture. Nobody should make a mistake here. Any student who has done neurology properly, can solve this. Look at this angle of the mouth. It is drooping downward. Okay, on this side, and on this side, see, it is shifted upward. This is known as nasolabial fold. Okay, nasolabial fold. This nasolabial fold should be prominent on the unaffected side, and it is not properly seen on the affected side. Look at this eye, it cannot be closed. See, Here it can be made a bit smaller, but here there is no possibility. And another one, the wrinkling. The wrinklings are normal here. And on this side, the patient cannot wrinkle the forehead. All these pictures are strong evidence of paralysis of this whole face on this side. Both the lower part of the face and upper part of the face both are paralyzed. So in which type of neuronal problem this happen? What is the cause for this?
Lower
Bell's
motor
palsy.
neuron.
Yes, this is lower motor neuron type of facial palsy. And if you say Bell's palsy is the most common cause of that, your answer is absolutely correct. Bell's palsy is the #1 cause of lower motor neuron type of facial paralysis, where unilateral whole face is affected. Excellent. So please remember this, word by word, which we have discussed right now, because next time you may be asked another picture and slightly in a different way. But if you know the points, you can always diagnose it. Another one. Let's move further. See there, spot diagnosis. Okay, by looking at this vesicular rash on the external ear and lower motor neuron type of paralysis of the facial nerve. What is the diagnosis? Anybody?
Ramsay-Hunt syndrome.
This is known as Ramsay-Hunt syndrome. He's right. This is known as Ramsay-Hunt syndrome. And what is the cause of this Ramsay-Hunt syndrome? Yes.
Herpes simplex.
Ramsay-Hunt syndrome. Usually this is caused by varicella zoster virus, okay, which belongs to herpes virus family. Usually it may be a manifestation of herpes zoster as well sometimes. Yes. So this is a spot diagnosis, Ramsay-Hunt syndrome. This is a painful condition. It can also lead to hearing loss in the patient. Typical diagnosis. Let's move on. Now, okay, all of you, please have a look there. So there are two clues given to you there. One is this hereditary pattern, or this is inheritance pattern, I should say, and this is the what is this which is shown in the picture? See this? Yes, anyone?
Fisher ring. KF ring.
Excellent. Kaiser-Fleischer ring or KF ring. And what type of inheritance is this? What is this inheritance? Yes.
Autosomal recessive.
Autosomal recessive. Now, autosomal recessive. So, what is the chance of autosomal recessive inheritance? What percentage of chances? Yes, in the family. You can answer from here. See this. The affected, baby, the chance of or percentage of affected baby is 25%. See here, 25%. Okay. So this is autosomal recessive inheritance, and this is Kaiser-Fleischer ring. If I combine these two things together, the diagnosis most probably is Wilson disease. Wilson disease. Very nice. Now, how you diagnose Wilson disease? Yes. What are the lab features? Yes.
Decrease serum ceruloplasmin, sir.
Decrease serum ceruloplasmin level. Good. One of that. Very good. Anything else? What are the other investigation you can do there?
So also we can confirm it by liver biopsy as well, sir.
Very good. The second thing is liver biopsy, and the third thing is urine copper excretion rate. These are the three things which you can go for. Very nice. One is ceruloplasmin level, which is decreased. Second, urine copper analysis, which is increased. And third, liver biopsy. And in this case, liver is having a lot of copper deposition. This is Wilson disease. Let me say a little bit more about this. Wilson disease is autosomal recessive inheritance, so it runs in the family. So we have to take a very good family history here. Second point, this disease mainly affects the liver. Okay, so over a long period of time, it can cause chronic liver disease and also cirrhosis of the liver. Now, it also affects brain. especially extrapyramidal system of the brain are affected, mainly the basal ganglia. And by affecting basal ganglia, it can lead to, movement disorder. These are called movement disorder. So there is dystonia or a difficult or painful type of contraction. Please mute yourself. Okay, you're getting noise there. Is that person? Okay, fine. So this is about Wilson disease. So what is the treatment? Do you know about any treatment of Wilson disease?
Yes, sir.
Mhm.
Dibenzolamine, sir.
Yes, you give penicillamine. Penicillamine is the copper chelating agent, so that can be tried. Okay, copper chelating agent like penicillamine. We can also give zinc. Okay, zinc has been tried these days, and there is one oral drug which is known as trientine. Trientine that can also be given. And finally, we can go for liver transplantation if the person has developed cirrhosis. Now let's move on. Number 57. Again, spot diagnosis. Look there. Look at the carefully and give me the diagnosis.
Edwards syndrome.
Why Edwards syndrome? What have you seen here?
Sir, trisomy 18.
Very good. Trisomy 18. Excellent. And along with that, some of the clinical features are also provided to you, like rocker bottom feet. This is so typical of Edwards syndrome. Rocker bottom feet means there is no arches developed there. Okay, it's a flat type of feet. And then this finger, the clenched fist type of finger, arrangement is highly typical. Don't forget it, because at the time of birth, I cannot do this karyotyping. I can only examine the baby, and if I see these features, I can think about Edwards syndrome and plan for karyotyping. So clenched fist with digit 2 and 5 overlapping 3 and 4, exactly like this. Digit 2 and 5 overlapping 3 and 4. Rocker bottom feet. Some congenital heart disease, hypertelorism, maybe cleft lip and palate, low set ears, all the other features of Edwards syndrome, trisomy 18. Excellent. Now let's move on. Number 58. A 30-year-old male presented with sudden onset of massive lower GI bleeding. This is the presentation. 30-year-old, massive lower GI bleeding. He is a non-case of ulcerative colitis. X-ray of the abdomen showed the diameter of transverse colon is 7 centimeters. And this is the picture you can clearly see here, massively dilated. What complication has most probably occurred in this patient? Yes.
Toxic megacolon, sir.
Yes.
I
Anybody?
think toxic megacolon.
Toxic megacolon. Very good. So Amro, what is toxic megacolon? Can you explain?
This is the one of the complications that can raise from there's dilated sir colon, should lead to massive dilate.
Yes. So he's right. This is a case of toxic megacolon, which is a very important complication of ulcerative colitis. This is actually a case of surgical emergency because this colon can rupture and it can also lead to massive hemorrhage, just like this. The person can develop peritonitis if it ruptures, and the person can develop hypovolemic shock if it bleeds a lot. Regarding the diagnosis of this, I need to measure this diameter. If it is more than 6 centimeter in the plain X-ray of the abdomen, then along with other features of ulcerative colitis, okay, I can make a diagnosis of transverse megacolon. That is the way. So there are many features of ulcerative colitis if I take a good history here. Regarding the history or symptoms of ulcerative colitis, there is chronic diarrhea with blood in the stool. There is abdominal pain, and all those things should be there. So this is a case of toxic megacolon. Now, another case for you. Okay, please pay attention there. This is a non-diabetic patient. Okay, non-diabetic patient who presented with features of sepsis and hypoxia. During examination, tongue was okay. Can you see this one? Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay. Can you answer then? Yeah.
Ludwig's angina.
Say it again.
I think, sir, it's Ludwig's angina.
Ludwig's angina. So give me reasons, please. Why?
So because the typical appearance of Ludwig angina like is like swelling and the tongue is usually pushed backward, and also patient is diabetic, so there's a high chance of infection of tooth, and then it can lead to cellulitis of their submental and submandibular region and cause to their
Very
Ludwig's
nice.
angina.
Very nice. So he has explained almost everything here. This is a case of Ludwig's angina. Ludwig's angina is an infection of submandibular area, just like here. Okay, submandibular area. This area. There's a cellulitis of this area. Till now, probably pus has not formed, but cellulitis is definitely there. I mean, there is a swelling, there's infection, and this infection will definitely push the tongue backward. And because of this complication, patient would be hypoxic, and patient may even die. At the same time, it's a high chance of sepsis there, sepsis. And usually these patients are diabetic. So a lot of clues are given for you, but until and unless you know the term, you cannot answer this question. So study Ludwig's angina in your ENT, okay, ear, nose and throat, subject. And this is one important manifestation there. Ludwig's angina. Another one, see there, okay, quite classical. First picture, okay, urine before the illness, and second picture, urine after the illness, this one. And another one, peripheral smear examination is shown here. So just correlate these things and give me the causative agent and the diagnosis also. So first of all, what is happening in the urine? Let's talk like that. What is happening? What is this urine? Yes.
Coca-Cola urine. PSGN.
Cola color urine.
Okay. Good.
PSGN.
Exactly. Maybe blood in the urine or hemoglobin in the urine. Okay. Isn't it? Either blood in the urine, that is RBC in the urine, or hemoglobin in the urine. These are the two possibility. Good. Now, what is this slide telling you? This one. See there. What type of things you can see here? This one. See here? Anybody?
Sir, I think, sir, this is a case of malaria, and which caused agent is plasmodium, and that peripheral smear shows that ring which formed by that parasite.
Exactly. Absolutely correct. Okay. So this is the ring form. This is the ring form of malarial parasite. This is RBC, and this ring form is present inside the RBC. And just correlate here now. This slide is given to you, and at the same time this slide. So this is known as black water fever, which is seen in which type of malaria? Black water fever. Yes. Which type?
Falciform.
Exactly. Falciparum. Okay. Falciparum malaria. The most severe type, also known as malignant type of malaria, caused by Plasmodium falciparum. So that is the question they are asking here. Black water fever because of hemoglobinuria, and the typical picture which is provided to you. Falciparum malaria, also known as malignant malaria, is the most severe one according to the severity and clinical feature. A lot of complication can happen in this disorder. One of that is called cerebral malaria. Okay, another one is called algid malaria, where the some gram-negative organism infect the patient on top of the all the malaric symptom and sign. Kidney failure can occur because of this black water fever. Okay, so a lot of other features would be there. Now let's move further. This is question number 61. A 5-year-old child presents with severe pain in the ear with high-grade fever for 2 days. Otoscopic examination shows this particular finding. So this is otoscopic examination picture. Okay, this particular finding is shown. What is the name of this sign? And what disease is shown here?
Sir, this is a case of acute seborrheic otitis media, and that otoscopic examination is showing the cartwheel sign, which is dilated blood vessel on the tympanic membrane.
Very good. Absolutely correct. I'm sure you have studied this already in ENT. This is acute suppurative otitis media. There are different stages, okay, of this disease. Means according to the stage, I can see the different features on tympanic membrane. This is known as cartwheel sign. It's absolutely right. Cartwheel sign. Okay. This is sign which is seen in pre-suppurative stage, stage before the pus collects there. And when the pus collects, we call that nipple sign, because one area of the tympanic membrane is bulged outside, and that is done by the pressure which is created by the pus collection there. Different otoscopic findings are there in acute suppurative otitis media. Now, which are the common organism that leads to ASOM?
Sir, pneumococci, staphylococci,
Streptococcus.
and Haemophilus.
Exactly. You are absolutely right. Yes. Moraxella catarrhalis, very good. Yes, that is also there. Wonderful. So these are pneumococci, Haemophilus influenza, Staphylococcus aureus, Moraxella catarrhalis. These are the organism. So treatment is very easy. Okay, treatment is just use one type of penicillin like amoxicillin, or to cover that staph. If you think staph may be there, just cover amoxicillin with clavulanic acid. That's it. It should be given for at least 5 to 7 days, and OPD management is desirable here.
Sir,
Yes, yes, please.
sir, there is one question in this one. Sir, if tympanic membrane is ruptured, so can we give then eardrops?
Yes, that's a good question you have asked. Okay, if tympanic membrane is ruptured, then first of all you need to clean that ear. You need to clean the tympanic cavity, and after that we can put antibiotic eardrops. Yes, because that antibiotic eardrop can go easily inside the tympanic cavity or the middle ear cavity, and it really helps the patient. But before the rupture of the tympanic membrane, that is useless. You don't want to give those eardrops at all. Like in this stage, there is no perforation, no rupture. We do not give the topical type of eardrop. We just treat the patient with systemic antibiotic.
Thank you, sir.
Right. Now, let's move on. Now see there, look at this picture nicely, and this is also a spot diagnosis. So only diagnosis is asked there without any clinical history to you. What is the diagnosis? Anyone?
Herpes ophthalmicus.
Yes, yes, please be confident and tell. Yeah.
Herpes ophthalmicus.
Yes, this is known as herpes zoster ophthalmicus. Okay, herpes zoster ophthalmicus. See this? This is like a shingles. Look at this dermatomal type of involvement. Okay, but here the affected nerve is called nasociliary nerve. Nasociliary nerve. So let me write it here for you. nasociliary nerve involvement. So when nasociliary nerve is involved by herpes zoster, now we call a typical sign for this, and this is known as Hutchinson sign. Hutchinson sign. This type of question may be asked to you, okay? Hutchinson sign or nasociliary nerve affection by herpes, zoster ophthalmicus. See, look at the eye, which is also affected. So this is a spot diagnosis here. A little bit difficult for the students probably, but now you should never forget this. Another one, very easy. Spot diagnosis again. Look at this histopathological slide, which is provided to you, and this is the clinical picture. So combine this together and give the diagnosis.
Retinoblastoma.
Retinoblastoma. Absolutely right. This is a case of retinoblastoma. What is this sign called? Yes, what we call this clinical?
Leukocoria.
Leukocoria. Absolutely. Leukocoria means white pupil. Leukocoria. There are certain other causes for leukocoria also. It is not only retinoblastoma, other causes are also there. But retinoblastoma is the most important diagnosis which we should rule out. And these are called Homer-Wright pseudorosette, okay, flexor Winter-Steiner rosette. These are blue rounded cell which forms this type of arrangement, and these are called rosette. These are highly typical of retinoblastoma. They are also seen in neuroblastoma though, but because of this clinical picture, we don't think about neuroblastoma here. This has to be retinoblastoma. It can manifest quite early in the life of that child. Sometimes there is a familial retinoblastoma which is present, and in that case bilateral involvement is quite common. Otherwise it is a unilateral type of tumor. Now another case, this patient presents with pain and swelling around the knee joint for few weeks. What's the diagnosis? See here please and tell me. What do you think? What's going on here? This radiological sign is called what? And that gives you diagnosis. Yes?
So that's a Codman's triangle. That is a periosteal reaction of very, very aggressive bone tumor. And so most probably this is a case of osteosarcoma.
Excellent. You are absolutely correct. This is a case of osteosarcoma, highly aggressive bone tumor, and this is called Codman's triangle. Is right. Codman's triangle. Now, this Codman's triangle is a periosteal elevation or reaction as a result of these malignant cells, and it's a triangle-like appearance here. This is seen in highly aggressive osteosarcoma. Okay, highly aggressive osteosarcoma. Good. So never forget this Codman's triangle, sunray spicules. Okay, all these are occurring together. Now another one. See there, please. Combine all these clinical features together and give me the diagnosis. You should, combine these things together for the diagnosis. So what is this? Let's talk one by one. What is this? See this? Look at the eye. What sign we call it?
Proptosis. Proptosis, exophthalmos.
Yes, proptosis or exophthalmos. Yes, both are the correct term. Proptosis or exophthalmos. And look here. Okay, what is happening to her fingers? Nail. See this?
See this? Acropathy.
Yes, this is known as acropathy or clubbing, isn't it? Clubbing or acropathy. Clubbing, you can also say, or you can say acropathy. And what is going on in this area? See this? This is the anterior aspect of tibia. So pretibial myxedema. Pretibial myxedema. Now combine all these things together and tell me the diagnosis.
Graves disease.
Graves disease. This has to be Graves' disease when they give me clinical features like this, Graves' disease. This is known as thyroid acropathy. This is pretibial mixed edema, and this is exophthalmos. And Graves' disease is the answer. Graves' disease is one of the most common cause of hyperthyroidism all over the world. This is an autoimmune disease. So what type of autoantibodies are common in Graves' disease? What are those? That is another question which may be asked to you.
Thyroid
Yes.
stimulating immunoglobulin.
Yes, these are known as thyroid stimulating immunoglobulin or TSI. They are known as TSI. So let me write this for the sake of other student who may watch it later on. Graves' disease. And the important autoantibody which is present here is TSI, thyroid stimulating immunoglobulin. Now this is a stimulating type of antibody. Because of this, this question is important for you. Most of the other antibodies are blocking type, but this is a stimulating type. So it acts on TSH receptors and it constantly stimulates the thyroid gland for the over release of T3 and T4 hormone. As a result of this, this is hyperthyroid condition. Hyperthyroid condition. What is the treatment of Graves' disease? Yes, what is the treatment? Anybody?
Sir, different type of treatment can be given to in case of hyperthyroidism. Like we can start from drugs like metimazole, carbimazole, PTU.
Mm-hmm.
If patient symptom doesn't control, so that we can go for radioactive iodine,
Good.
and then we can also do surgery.
Very good. So, in nutshell, he has told all the management point here. So let me repeat again. First is you need to control the hyperthyroid state in the patient by giving certain drug like antithyroid drug like propylthiouracil, methimazole or carbimazole. These are the example. At the same time, there is sympathetic overstimulation in this patient. So I need to give beta blocker as well. Propranolol is the preferred one here. Propranolol. Along with that, potassium iodide can be also given because it suppresses the release of preformed thyroid hormone from the thyroid gland. And radioactive iodine is given to destroy the thyroid gland. And surgery is also there, that is subtotal thyroidectomy. So see that if you remember like this, you already got the revision of the Graves' disease topic here. Let's move on. Now, this old lady is having lethargy, constipation, coarse skin, and delayed relaxation of calf muscle. Now, what is the treatment? So you need to diagnose this condition first, and then only treatment will come. Yes.
Hypothyroidism.
Okay. So he's saying this is a case of hypothyroidism. So what can you see here on the picture? Yes.
So there is coarse type of skin, and there
Good.
is also a relaxation of muscle, and there is decrease in reflexes, and also edematous face and lethargy and constipation.
Good. So all of these are suggestive of hypothyroidism. Is absolutely correct. So a lot of clues have been given here: lethargy, constipation, okay, coarse skin, and delayed relaxation of the calf muscle. And on the picture, look at the face here. Look at the facial expression. It's quite dull. Okay, it's a dull type of face. It's a coarse face. Coarse face means there is a bit of swelling on the face, but when I palpate the facial skin, it feels rough. It feels rough. That's what exactly happens in hypothyroidism or mixed edema. There is deposition of mucopolysaccharide like substances there. Okay. See this alopecia is another important feature of hypothyroidism. Look at this loss of the hair from the scalp, which also you can see on the picture. And this is how we detect delayed relaxation of calf muscle. This is ankle jerk elicitation, and your whole eye should be on the calf muscle, and those calf muscle relax very slowly. This is a very important evidence of hypothyroidism. Now, what is the treatment? Question is treatment. What is the treatment now?
Levothyroxine hormone.
5.
Exactly. Levothyroxine or L-thyroxine is the treatment of this case. Now, treatment is quite easy here. Probably she has to be given lifelong L-thyroxine in this case. What may be the cause of this in this lady? Cause?
Hashimoto
Hashimoto's
thyroiditis.
Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Anything else? Any other causes?
There might be
Causes can be,
there's
sir.
injury.
Yeah, causes may be surgery. Yes. Causes may be radioactive iodine destruction before. Yes. Okay. Or causes may be other autoimmune disease of the thyroid. Causes may be goiter, but I don't see any goiter here in her neck. Okay. It may be, goiter or because of iodine deficiency, but that may be very less likely here because I don't see any swelling on the neck. It may be sometimes caused by tumors. So all those are some of the important causes of hypothyroidism. Now, what happens to TSH level if we do TSH in this lady? What happens to TSH?
High level, sir.
High. Okay, you are absolutely right. Most common causes are primary hypothyroidism. So a TSH level are quite high because of very poor negative feedback. Very poor negative feedback. Yes, they are usually high. And in case of secondary hypothyroidism, that is low. Now, this is another case, okay, case number 67. This old lady has developed bony swelling on the distal interphalangeal joint, like you can see here very clearly. Okay, this is the distal interphalangeal joint, and here's the swelling. She also had pain on both knee joint for a long time. Okay, and this is the hand. You can see it. What is the name of this sign? What is the name of the sign and name of the disease also?
A burden's node seen in rheumatoid arthritis. Osteoarthritis.
Osteoarthritis. Okay, now you are right. These are Heberden's node. You're absolutely right regarding the sign. Heberden's node. Heberden's node are the bony swelling of the distal interphalangeal joint, which are very commonly seen in osteoarthritis. Okay, not rheumatoid arthritis. And another clue is given to you. She had pain on both knee joint. Knee joint involvement is very common in osteoarthritis, whereas the small joints of the hand are commonly involved in rheumatoid arthritis along with other joint. And in rheumatoid arthritis, usually the proximal, interphalangeal joint are swollen. That is known as Bouchard's node. Okay, Bouchard's node, which is usually seen in rheumatoid arthritis. So this is Heberden's node, a feature of osteoarthritis. Now, see here. Look at this now. This is a very easy case because we have discussed this type of case before also. Adenoma sebaceum, ash leaf spot, and intractable epilepsy with intellectual disability, means a bit of mental retardation. All of these are commonly seen in which of the disorder? What is the diagnosis? They have asked this. Yes.
Tuberous sclerosis.
Tuberous sclerosis. Absolutely correct. Tuberous sclerosis. Now see here, this is known as adenoma sebaceum. Adenoma sebaceum. These are not the acne. Okay, these are not the lesion of acne actually. These are the lesions of tuberous sclerosis itself. This is important point to remember. Though the name is highly, confusing with something to do with the sebaceous gland and things like that, but it just looks like that. It is actually the true pathology of tuberous sclerosis. These are known as ash leaf spot. Ash leaf spot. Tuberous sclerosis is autosomal dominant disorder. It runs in the family as autosomal dominant inheritance, 50% chance in every pregnancy. Apart from these organs, it also affects the heart and the kidney. In heart, okay, rhabdomyoma can be seen very commonly. Let's move on. Now, this case is also very interesting for you. So let me go through this first, and then you are going to diagnose it. A 36-year-old woman, okay, her age is 36-year-old, developed severe abdominal pain over the past 24 hours. On physical examination, her abdomen musculature is rigid. Okay, so there is a rigidity of the intra-abdominal wall muscle because of the problem she is having. Lab studies show her serum lipase level is very high. Lipase level is 1165 unit per liter, and this is the normal range. Okay. This is the normal range. Her total WBC count is 16,390. Among them, 86% are granulocyte. Her neutrophilia is there. The gross appearance of her disease process is shown here. These are the true pathological specimen. Which of the following can occur very commonly here? You have got 4 options: coagulative necrosis, fat necrosis, fibrinoid necrosis, and gangrenous necrosis. First, you need to diagnose the disease and then think about which is the correct option.
Sir, I think it's pancreatitis and fat necrosis occur in the pancreatitis.
Good. So you think B is the correct answer here. Why? Why you said it's a case of pancreatitis?
Severe abdominal pain from 24 hours and also abdominal rigid. And lipase is also increased with the WBC account.
So all of them point towards this is a case of pancreatitis, acute pancreatitis. And in acute pancreatitis, fat necrosis is very common to occur. You're absolutely correct. Very good. Okay. Now see here, all of you, all of the other students who are listening here, for them. So these are the areas of fat necrosis. Apart from fat necrosis, sometimes there is saponification, means of calcium will go there and deposit. That process is known as saponification, and as a result of that, this patient will develop hypocalcemia as well. So who knows, in the next case the scenario is exactly like this, but one of the option would be given hypocalcemia. So always remember this. Okay, always. Now let's talk a little bit about acute pancreatitis. What are the causes of acute pancreatitis? The common causes. Anybody? What are the common causes?
Gallstone,
Gallstone.
hypercalcemia.
Exactly. Gallstone, very good. Gallstone and alcohol are considered 2 most common causes. Gallstone and alcohol, followed by hyperlipidemia, hypercalcemia as well, and trauma. Okay, trauma. So all of these are other causes. Even some infection like Coxsackie viral infection or mumps can be considered as the cause of acute pancreatitis. But in the exam, always take the name of those 2 important etiology: alcohol and gallstone, apart from other. Now, this is one of the cause of peritonitis. So the overlying muscles will be rigid, which is clearly shown here. A case of severe abdominal pain, and the pain is going backwards. Okay, it is going towards the backside. So this is a deep boring type of pain. One of the important lab criteria for the diagnosis of pancreatitis is elevation of enzymes. elevation of enzyme. And those enzymes are lipase and amylase. Now, lipase is more specific than amylase regarding the diagnosis. Amylase can be raised because of some other reasons also, but lipase is considered more specific here. Regarding the treatment, acute pancreatitis cases are always admitted in the surgical ward, always, and we consider them as a surgical causes. Like gallstone is always managed surgically, though alcohol intoxication or alcohol damage can be managed medically, but we admit this type of patient in the surgical ward. And the most important management here is supportive and symptomatic treatment, except the gallstone. If that gallstone has completely blocked the sphincter of OD, okay, then we remove it. Otherwise, the most important treatment is symptomatic and supportive. Now, what complication can occur in acute pancreatitis? What are the complications? The complication can be, okay, ARDS, isn't it? ARDS, pseudocyst. Yes, you're right. Pseudocyst formation, very good. Or it can lead to hypovolemia and renal failure as well. It can also lead to TIC. All of these are caused by cytokine storm. There is one mechanism known as cytokine storm in case of acute pancreatitis, and these different complications are caused by that. Let's move on. Now, another case for you. Now, question number 70. This girl is having difficulty in opening eyes. Okay, difficulty in opening eyes and also developing drooping of the jaw. She got better after getting hydrophonium. Which tumor is commonly associated with this disease? Now, first you need to diagnose this condition, then only the tumor names comes. Yes. What is the disease? Thymoma. Yes, I got the answer. Thymoma. You are absolutely right. Now tell me, which disease is this first? What is the name of this condition? Myasthenia gravis. Yes, this is called myasthenia gravis. These are the typical features: difficulty in opening the eye, drooping of the jaw, especially at the evening time, and when she get hydrophonium like drug, she gets better. Okay, and what type of drug is hydrophonium? What type of drug?
Acetylcholinesterase inhibitor.
Okay, anti-cholinesterase, isn't it? Anti-cholinesterase, because cholinesterase is the enzyme which will degrade acetylcholine, and these are the drugs which block that enzyme so that the degradation of acetylcholine doesn't occur. And we want that in myasthenia gravis, because in myasthenia there are autoantibody which block the acetylcholine receptor present in neuromuscular junction. If we increase the concentration of acetylcholine there, then okay, they can displace those autoantibody and can act there on their own. This is what we want regarding the treatment. Apart from hydrophonium, what are the other drug we use for the treatment? What are the other drugs?
Pyridostigmine and neostigmine.
Exactly. Pyridostigmine, neostigmine, and physostigmine. These are the other drugs. Physostigmine is less commonly used because it crosses the central nervous system. It crosses the blood-brain barrier, so it can have some side effect. And physostigmine is very commonly used in one area, that is atropine poisoning. In atropine poisoning, we like to use physostigmine rather than other drug. But in this situation, physostigmine is not usually given to the patient. And one of the important cause of myasthenia is thymoma, and that is the question which is asked here to you, thymoma. So we need to find out the tumor, and if it is there, we need to go for the surgery. Let's move on. Now, another case. A 50-year-old male or man is being treated for a lung abscess. He's a 50-year-old man getting treated for lung abscess. Remember, lung abscess is a chronic disease. He has received broad spectrum antibiotic therapy with nafcillin, clindamycin, and gentamicin for the past 17 days. He has developed abdominal pain, fever, and diarrhea over the past 3 days. The gross appearance of his colonic mucosa is shown here in the picture. Okay, these are the appearance of the colonic mucosa. Now the question is, what is the treatment of this condition? Anyone? First of all, tell me what is the diagnosis here, and then only treatment comes. What is the diagnosis?
Pseudomembranous colitis.
Pseudomembranous colitis. Now, what is the cause of pseudomembranous colitis here in this case?
Sir, because of prolonged use of broad spectrum antibiotic, the normal flora of the gut is disturbed. So there is overgrowth of Clostridium difficile.
Exactly. He's absolutely right. And the way he's explaining is also very correct. Because of prolonged use of this broad spectrum antibiotic, especially clindamycin here. Clindamycin is the culprit. Okay. For a longer duration, there is overgrowth of Clostridium difficile, which leads to antibiotic associated colitis or pseudomembranous colitis. So it has got a different name here. Okay, it's also known as antibiotic associated colitis or diarrhea, whatever you want to say, or pseudomembranous colitis. Now, ampicillin and clindamycin and any other type of broad spectrum antibiotic can do this actually. So these are the appearance, pseudo polyp like appearance. See, these are the exudate organization of the exudate, which exactly looks like a polyp, not a true one. That's why they are not a pseudo polyp. The organism is Clostridium difficile. So what is the treatment you like to use here? What is the treatment?
Metronidazole.
Metronidazole and one more?
Vancomycin.
Exactly. Metronidazole and vancomycin. Absolutely correct. Either one of them is the correct answer here. Metronidazole or vancomycin. Let's move on. Now, bit of anatomical question, and I'm coming towards the end of this now. Recurrent laryngeal nerve on the left side curves around a structure in thorax before it climbs upwards towards the larynx. Which structure is that on the left side? That is the question. Yeah, this is the recurrent laryngeal nerve, you can clearly see. Okay, so on the left side, it curves one important structure in the thorax. What is the name of that structure? Anybody?
Arch of aorta.
Yes, that is arch of the aorta. Absolutely right. Arch of the aorta. On the right side, which structure it curves? Yes, right subclavian artery. On the right side, right subclavian artery. On the left side, arch of the aorta. This type of questions can be asked to you. Okay. Now, this is recurrent laryngeal nerve, the most important nerve which supplies the larynx. All the intrinsic muscles of the larynx, except cricothyroid, is supplied by recurrent laryngeal nerve. Never forget this golden statement. All intrinsic muscles of the larynx, except cricothyroid, are supplied by recurrent laryngeal nerve. Now, which nerve supplies cricothyroid muscle then? Which nerve is that? You can see here.
External branch of the.
Yes, you can clearly see here. See this? Here. Okay. This is cricothyroid. Okay. See this? This is the external branch. And from where it is coming? Superior laryngeal nerve. Everything is given here. Superior laryngeal nerve, which is a branch of vagus nerve. It has internal and external branches. So it is supplying cricothyroid muscle. And then regarding the sensory now, sensory supply of the larynx. Above the vocal cord, the sensory supply is by superior laryngeal nerve, mainly through the internal branch. Below the vocal cord, it is again by recurrent laryngeal nerve. So this is such an important point from your anatomy that keep on coming in different exam. Now a bit of question from the ophthalmology. This is a degenerative condition of conjunctiva. Look at this picture and tell me the diagnosis. What is the name of this condition?
Pterygium.
Yes. I'm sure you have done this in ophthalmology. This is called pterygium. Okay, pterygium. So this pterygium is a degenerative condition which is developed in that area. Pterygium. Okay. This P is silent here. Okay, just like pneumonia, P is silent here. Pterygium, but we still write P in the front. This is a degenerative condition of the conjunctiva, and the treatment is surgery. If it is, hampering the vision, then we remove it surgically. Let's move on. Now 74. This is a non-case of diabetic for 20 years. He recently developed painful eye, okay, with decreased vision. So what is the diagnosis? See this. So you can see the problem what is shown here. Okay, the problem which is shown here, and this is a non-case of diabetes mellitus. And if diabetes mellitus is there for such a long time, a diabetic retinopathy will develop, or diabetic eye disease will develop. So this is a case of diabetic eye disease. But the question is typical. If you see like this, what term you use there? That is the question. Anyone?
Sir, is it in cell wall type of lining? Cell wall?
I think,
No.
sir, it's Enger closer glaucoma.
Yes, say it again.
I think, sir, this is a case of acute Enger closer glaucoma.
Can you explain why you say that?
Sir, because the history is very short, and also painful eyes with decreased vision, and also patient is diabetic, and that I cannot exactly read that picture, but I think that angle is narrowed.
Now, see that. Yes, it can give rise to a type of glaucoma. Okay, but with this only this much clue, the diagnosis of glaucoma would be difficult for you. Okay, but you're thinking I cannot ignore it. This is a very straightforward question. They just ask you what is the sign when you see this new blood vessel formation on the iris. This is iris, of course. This is pupil, so this is iris. So what is that condition? What we call when new blood vessels form on the iris, which is seen in diabetic retinopathy. This is known as rubeosis iridis. Rubeosis iridis. And this rubeosis iridis can result in a lot of complication. Okay, it can even lead to angle closer glaucoma. Yes. Okay, like that you can correlate later on. And it can also lead to loss of the vision because it is strongly associated with neovascularization in retina as well. Rubeosis iridis. Now we are reaching to the last part now. In the developing embryo, stylopharyngeus muscle and hyoid bone is developed from a pharyngeal arch. Which of the following cranial nerve is associated with this arch? Now, you have to choose one cranial nerve from the list. Which is that associated with this one? The question. Anybody?
Facial.
Facial? Are you sure? Any other student?
Glossopharyngeal.
No, glossopharyngeal. Now, why you said glossopharyngeal?
Sir, because these muscles are stylopharyngeal muscles in hyoid bone and that glossopharyngeal nerve, all these arise from third pharyngeal arch.
Yes, that is the clue for you. Very good. So the answer is glossopharyngeal nerve, or the A option, because this stylopharyngeus muscle is the only muscle, okay, in the neck area which is supplied by glossopharyngeal nerve. So that is a strong clue for you. And then this hyoid bone and stylopharyngeus muscle are derived from the pharyngeal arch number 3, and the nerve for pharyngeal arch 3rd is glossopharyngeal nerve. So that is the answer. Let's move to another case. A 20-year-old woman is unable to conceive and undergoes an infertility workup. So this is a case of infertility. A pelvic ultrasound reveals this congenital anomaly. You can clearly see here. Okay. Failure of fusion of which duct is the most likely explanation for her anomalous uterus? What is the name of that duct? That embryological duct. Yes?
Mullerian duct.
Mullerian duct.
Mullerian duct. Absolutely. Mullerian duct. What is another name for Mullerian duct?
Paramesonephric.
Paramesonephric duct. Yes. Paramesonephric duct or Mullerian duct. That is the correct answer. And what is this congenital anomaly which you can see here? What is the name of this congenital anomaly?
It's bicornate.
Now see this. Okay, this is a bit. Yes, please. Yeah.
It can be septate.
Bicornuate septum.
Bicornuate uterus, septate uterus. Any other name? This is known as uterus didelphi. Uterus didelphi. Why? Septate means there is one septum, but the cavity is same. There are two cavities. See there, two cavities. So I cannot call it septate uterus. There are two uterus here. See, completely two uterus. See this. Even the vagina are two. And one septum is right there in the middle. So this type of condition is not a uterus or uterine didelphi. Yes, the common cause of uterine didelphi is failure of fusion of these Mullerian ducts together. And the last question, increased urinary homovanillic acid is a biochemical marker of which of the following condition? You have to choose one.
Pheochromocytoma.
Pheochromocytoma.
Pheochromocytoma, absolutely correct. Because this homovanillic acid is the metabolite of catecholamine, epinephrine and norepinephrine, and then epinephrine and norepinephrine are produced by pheochromocytoma. So this is the easy answer here. Okay, so with this, I have concluded this type of discussion for the time being. Okay.